This is only my second attempt at public speaking, so if I'm not up to scratch, please forgive me. He's already given the introduction that I'm going to talk about temple inscriptions. Before I get to inscriptions, I want to talk about temple architecture very briefly. But I'm not going to describe any architectural features of any temple. But I'm just going to take the Srirangam temple and tell you why it is textually important. There are Sanskrit texts which are called Pancharatra Agamas. There was a Vaishnavite Acharya called Yamuna. He was a predecessor of Ramanuja. And Yamuna said that these Pancharatra texts were from Kashmir. He called them Kashmir Agama. In the early years of the 20th century, there was a German Indologist called Otto Schrader who said there was a lot of internal evidence which definitely pointed to a Kashmiri origin. And he said there was even a reference to snow in one of the texts. And he said that was further clinching evidence. So one of these Pancharatra Agama texts is the Paushkara Samhita, which gives you 25 architectural plans for temples. There's another Samhita which is called the Parameshwara Samhita, which picks out 4 of these 25 plans, and it says that these 4 plans are to be seen in the periphery of the Srirangam temple. The Parameshwara Samhita gives you the names of the icons in the niches, recesses, the corners, near the side doors, everything in Srirangam. And in fact, it gives you a list of 230 images in the Srirangam temple. Sadly, Srirangam was sacked when invading armies came into Srirangam. So most of the original temple that was described in the Parameshwara Samhita is lost to us. But even so, it's very, very interesting because here you have a Kashmiri text which describes a temple in the extreme south of India. So even whatever little of Srirangam we do have left today is definitely worth researching, keeping in mind the Parameshwara Samhita and its extensive descriptions about the architectural features of Srirangam. Even otherwise, it's worthwhile to study temple architecture because they have withstood the test of time. Here we complain about buildings which are hardly 30, 40 years old, and we talk about seepage of water and leakage and all that. But just look at the temples, thousands of years old, and they're still there. However, the HRNC seems bent on preventing us from studying these temples because in the name of renovation, every time they renovate a temple, a piece of heritage is lost. You go to a Chola temple or a Pallava temple, you find that they've ripped up the flooring and they would have replaced it with marble. Imagine marble or tiles in a Chola or a Pallava temple. It's so incongruous, it makes me shudder. And many temples like Tiruvattriyur, for example, have inscriptions on the floor. So when they pull up the stones and throw them away, that much history is again lost to you. But you ask the HRNC why they do this. They always have one stock answer. They tell you that the Samhitas, the Pancharatra Agamas, tell you that you should renovate a temple every 12 years. However, some years ago, I spoke to a Sanskrit scholar who is one of the foremost authorities on the Pancharatra Agamas, and he said that there is no text where there is any such stipulation. So where the HRNC gets the stipulation from, nobody knows. It's for them to answer. So, coming to temple inscriptions. In many temples in Tamil Nadu, you find a wording that seems rather strange, but which does have an explanation. You will find this inscription repeating in many temples. It says, so and so donated a flock of sheep to light a perpetual lamp. So what's this connection between sheep and lighting a lamp? This is how it worked. Supposing a man wanted to have a lamp lit in a temple in memory of an ancestor. He'd go to the temple, donate a flock of sheep, and he'd be done with that. He would just say, okay, light this lamp, this size, every day light it with ghee. The temple would then advertise saying, here's a flock of sheep, anyone interested? So someone would go to the temple and take the flock. The flock would consist of a certain number of rams, ewes of fertile age, and lambs. This man could take away that flock, he could do what he wanted with it. If they had little ones in future, he could sell them, he could do anything he wanted. The only thing he had to do was that he had to keep the ghee coming. That had to come every day to the temple. So the donors' wishes were taken care of and livelihood was provided for many people. Supposing this man at some point decided he didn't want these sheep, all that he had to do was to go to the temple and say, take back the flock. But the flock that he returned would have to contain the same number of rams, ewes of fertile age, and lambs as the original flock which the temple had given him. So if you take a temple of the size of Srirangam or Thiruvannaikkaval or the big temple, there would have been several donors who wanted perpetual lamps lit. That means several flocks of sheep. That means several people provided with livelihood. So the temples were not just self-sustaining, but they provided livelihood to many people. Coming to the status of women, what would you say if I told you that in the BC period, there was a woman, and a widow at that, who performed Vedic sacrifices? She actually sat at the altar before the Vedic fire, and she herself did the sacrifices. So, does seem unbelievable in a supposedly conservative society, doesn't it? But it actually happened. There's a cave temple in Maharashtra where there is an inscription which dates back to the 1st century BC. And this inscription tells you there was a widowed queen called Nagamnika. She performed as many as 16 Vedic sacrifices, including the Ashwamedha. So how was this possible? There was a Mimamsa school which had a very liberal interpretation of Sanskrit texts. So in Sanskrit, the Shastra texts tell you, he who surrenders to God will be saved. Sharanagato Rakshitaha. Now that is masculine gender. So this Mimamsa school argued, does this mean that a woman who surrenders is not going to be saved? Of course she's going to be saved. So they picked up this interpretation and applied this liberal interpretation to almost every Shastric tenet. So wherever the Shastra said, this is how a man performs a yaga, this Mimamsa school said, okay, man includes woman. So she can also do a yaga. Interestingly, this Mimamsa school flourished in an area which was very close to where Nagamnika ruled. So it's quite possible that she was a disciple of this school, which is why she had a very liberal interpretation and she herself performed yagas. Coming to probity in public life, we've become so inured to hearing about corruption that we're no longer surprised by it. But our ancestors were very particular to see that people in public life were not corrupt. We have an inscription in the Vaikunta Perumal temple in Paraya Shivaram. Paraya Shivaram is near Kanchipuram. This inscription dates back to 922 AD. That would be roughly the 15th regnal year of Parantaka Chola I. This inscription says that when a man became a member of the municipal body, the municipal council, he'd have to declare his assets. When his tenure ended and he stepped down from office, again he'd have to declare his assets. So if there'd been a surge in his wealth in that period, you'd know he'd had his hands in the till, or he had misused his position to amass wealth. So that's how they ensured that anyone in public office was not corrupt. There's another very interesting stipulation in this inscription in Paraya Shivaram. It says that a member of a municipal body had to attend every meeting, no excuses. If he skipped one meeting, then he'd have to forfeit an entire year's pay. Just contrast that with the behavior of our parliamentarians. Walkouts, disruption of parliament business, no business is transacted. Do they lose any privileges? No. In Ennairam, there is an inscription which is actually Rajaraja Chola's inscription. And from the word Thiruvai Murindarul, we know that it came directly from the mouth of the king. There's nothing very important about the inscription. It's the usual donation of sheep for lighting a lamp. But there's a very interesting phrase that's used there. He says, Shrama Karyam Dhruttuvor. A loose translation of that would be Department of Labor and Welfare Works. So just look at this small town of Ennairam. It not just has a local body for taking care of welfare works, but it even has such a pompous title, Shrama Karyam Thiruttuvor, a Department of Labor and Welfare. So that's how well the king tended to even a remote outpost in his kingdom, because he was in Tanjavur. But Ennairam is somewhere here in North Arcot. So he took such good care of people even in remote places. Coming to water, something that concerns us one way or the other, it's either a flood or it's a drought. It's not as if this is new to Tamil Nadu. In fact, Tamil Nadu has faced these problems in the past also. But they knew how to take care of these problems. Let's take Rajaraja first. When he had the big temple built, he had a pond also built, and he called it the Shivaganga Kulam. He also built a huge lake, which later in the Nayak period came to be called the Shivapanayakan Eri. Every drop of water that fell into the Shivaganga Kulam, which fell into the big temple, flowed into the Shivaganga Kulam. From there it was taken to all the ponds in Thanjavur city. So all the wells in Thanjavur were always kept recharged. There was no water shortage. However, by the time of the Nayaks, the population in Thanjavur had increased. So the water from the Shivaganga Kulam alone was not enough to meet the needs of the people. So what did the Nayak kings do? There were other lakes around Thanjavur from which they brought water to the Shivaganga Kulam, and from the Shivaganga Kulam, through underground terracotta channels, they took the water to all the ponds inside Thanjavur city. And whenever there was a chance of flooding inside Thanjavur, they ensured that the flood water was diverted towards the Samudram area, so called because it was huge, like a Samudram, like an ocean. Okay, so what's happened to all these ponds and lakes? The Shivaganga Kulam is there, very much there, you can see it. But the land under which the terracotta channels passed, taking water from the Shivaganga Kulam to Thanjavur, those lands have become housing plots. People have built houses there, thereby blocking the terracotta channels. So water stagnates and stinks in the Shivaganga Kulam. As for the Shivapanayakan Eri, the huge eri that Rajaraja built, until 15 years ago it had water. Today it's a residential colony. The Samudram eri. Every time I go to Thanjavur, I find that a little more of that area has been encroached upon. So if you are interested in seeing it, it's near the Punnainallur Mariamman temple. Please see it soon. 20 years from now, we don't know if it will be there. So that's the state of our lakes there. It was not just the Cholas, the Pallavas and the Pandyas also used water very judiciously. The Pallavas ruled over a very arid region, North Arcot with Kanchipuram as their capital. The Palar has generally never had much water in it. In fact, when we had that flood a couple of years ago, people who were even 50, 60 years old, they ran to the Palar to take pictures because they never seen water in it before. So it's that dry a river. So what did the Pallavas do? Wherever there were two hills adjacent to each other, they built a lake between them so that water that flowed down the slopes of the hills would collect in the lake and it wouldn't go to waste. So rainwater was conserved. And it served another purpose also. They didn't have to build bunds because the two slopes were natural bunds. So that's how judiciously they used natural resources. You can still see, fortunately, two such lakes built by the Pallavas. One is the Dushi Mamandur Lake and the other is the Panamalai Eri in Viluppuram district. They also kept their lakes deepened and desilted through an ongoing process throughout the year. It was called Kuri Kuttudal. So a boat would go to the middle of the lake. It would have several people who could hold their breath underwater. So one diver would go in. He would take with him a vessel. He'd scoop up mud from the bottom of the lake. He'd put it into that vessel. When it was full, he'd give it a tug. It would be pulled up. He'd come up for breath. The mud would be put in the boat. Another diver would go in. Again scoop up the mud. That mud would also come up. When the boat was full, they would come to the bank of the lake and dump it there. And that would be used to strengthen the bank of the lake. So again, two purposes served: desilting, deepening of the lake, and strengthening the bunds of the lake. Irrigation. It's very interesting to see what an ingenious but very simple device they had to meet the irrigational needs of their people. They had what was called a Kumuri Tumbu. So this is how it worked. About 100 feet from the bank of the lake, on the bed of the lake, they built a huge stone platform. On top of that platform, there would be a squarish stone structure. Imagine that this is the stone structure. It would have tiny holes in the side and a big hole at the top. And there would be an iron plug going through this hole, keeping the hole covered. The village council would have met and decided which of the farmers needed how much water for their crops. So when it was time to release water, an able-bodied swimmer would go to the Kumuri Tumbu, he'd pull up the plug. So there are these tiny holes here. Fertile silt from the river would gush in along with the water, and through other channels it would be taken to a field nearby. So supposing a farmer here were growing something like sugarcane, that's a water-intensive crop. So they would have worked out in advance how much water he needed. He'd be given whatever water he needed to keep his crop from drying up. Once his quota was over, the swimmer would go back to the Kumuri Tumbu, bang, the plug would go in, then he'd go to the next Kumuri Tumbu. pull up the plug, again water would gush in through these holes, bringing with it silt, and through other channels it could go to some other field. Supposing that man was growing urad dal, that doesn't require a lot of water. So even if the acreage under cultivation was significant, he wouldn't get as much water as the sugarcane child. Then once his needs had been met, again the swimmer would go, plug that kumri tumbu, go to the next kumri tumbu. So a lake could have easily 10, 12 kumri tumbas. And this is how the needs of every farmer were taken care of. Not even one farmer was left out of the purview of this scheme. The kumri tumbas were such an important part of irrigation that kings and queens were proud to lend their names to the kumri tumba. So you will find some kumri tumba being named after Raja, something being named after his queen. So they were very proud to be associated with this kumri tumba system. The Pandyas also had kumri tumbas. In fact, somewhere near Tirupparam-Kundram, they had a huge lake with kumri tumbas. So some 50-60 years ago, you could see these kumri tumbas there. Today, you can't see a kumri tumba in situ anywhere. Maybe you can see broken parts somewhere in a PWD office. Why PWD? Because it's the Public Works Department that is supposed to be maintaining lakes. Every lake also had a granite channel which was called a curry well. The purpose of this, the channel, was to see that when it rained copiously, the village or any area around the lake was not flooded. The excess water would flow out through the curry well. But in spite of all the best precautions that we might take, nature will always have its way. So there were floods, there were famines. So how did they handle them? Just as their crops did not wilt, they didn't wilt either. Historical records show us how socially responsible our ancestors were. In the 13th century, the Chandramauli river was in spate and the Tirukkuvalai temple was threatened. So a villager called Thirumalai Kadan, he took it upon himself to save the temple. He diverted the flood water and he saved the temple and he saved the entire village. Only one small street, the houses were damaged. But he was such a conscientious person that he felt sorry about even that one small street being damaged. So he repaired that street and he donated his land to the temple because the diversion of flood water had submerged lands belonging to the temple. So he saved the village and he also gave his property for repairs. That's how responsible Thirumalai Kadan was. In the 13th century, well, this was happening in Tirukkuvalai in the 13th century. In the 13th century, here in Tiruvannamalai district, there was a very severe drought. And as a result, there was a very severe famine. So an inscription dated 1202 Christian era, that would be the period of Kulothunga III, roughly 24th regnal year of Kulothunga. This inscription tells us that 400 grams of rice cost 1 gold coin. The inscription doesn't give you metric measures, of course. It gives you the measures that were in existence then, but I've just converted it to you for easy reference. So 400 grams of rice, 1 gold coin. So there was a brother and sister duo living in that area. His name was Narpattonnayiram Pillai and his sister's name was Mangair Karashi. These two decided to step in to help their people. They had a new lake dug, provided water, they repaired existing lakes, and they decided that in future the people of Tiruvannamalai should never have to suffer this way. So they created a trust, they endowed it with all their property, and the purpose of this trust was to maintain lakes and to ensure that the people never had to suffer. As long as they were alive, they administered the trust. After their lifetime, their descendants continued to administer the trust for some years. When they were no longer able to do so, they transferred the trust and all its property to the Tiruvannamalai temple. And the transfer deed, this is where it gets very interesting, the transfer deed was signed by every person who was associated with the temple. All the priests, the people who worked in the temple kitchen, the temple gardeners, the palanquin bearers, those who made ornaments for the deity, those who washed the clothes of the deity, those who swept, those who did the columns, everyone was a signatory to the transfer deed. Why was it so? Because if one of them had any fancy ideas about pilferage, the others would act as a check. So look at how they not only created a trust, but they drew up a perfect legal document in stone, no less. Rajendra Chola, the son of Rajaraja, when he returned after conquering the Gangetic region, that's why he's called Gangekonda Chola, he wanted to erect a pillar of victory to celebrate his victorious battle. So what did he do? he did not erect a pillar of brick and mortar, but he erected a Jalastamba. He had a lake cut and called it the Gange Konda Cholapuram Lake. So even in victory, even when they were in a celebratory mood, the kings had the needs of their people in mind. They didn't go around installing statues of themselves. While they did all this and took care of the needs of their people, they never lost sight of aesthetics either. There's a town called Nagalapuram. Those who motored down from Chennai to Tirupati would have seen Nagalapuram. 5 kilometers from Nagalapuram, there is a stone Nandi. And from the inscription on the top of that Nandi, you can guess that it's either late 9th century or early 10th century. The beauty about this Nandi is that throughout the year, 365 days in a year, water gushes out of the mouth of that Nandi and collects in a pond near that Nandi. And where does this water come from? We don't know. But an intelligent guess would be that it comes from some perennial spring in the forest nearby. So do we have a Nandi like this in Tamil Nadu? Yes and no. There is a temple in Takkolam, a Shiva temple in Takkolam, which is near Kanchipuram again. Here there is a stone Nandi. From the mouth of this Nandi, water used to gush. Note the past tense, used to gush out. The water would take a circumambulatory path around the Sanctum Sanctorum. Then it would gush out of the mouth of another Nandi, fall into the Kallara river, and then it would be taken to the sea. The two stone Nandis can still be seen in Takkolam. That's the yes, but water does not gush forth from their mouth, hence the no. We've done something to the plumbing system, so it doesn't work anymore. So our temples give us clues about ancient architecture. They are documentary proof of the civic sense of our ancestors and of the social responsibility of our kings. They're a very vital link to our past. Your heritage, my heritage, never mind if you're an atheist. Most temple inscriptions are not about religion at all. So let's preserve our temples. Thank you very much for listening.
We'll have questions now.
Jambukeshwar temple in Tiruvanakkal also was like that, right? Suppose Jambukeshwar temple in Tiruvanakkal.
Vellore.
Tiruvanakkal also had a perennial, I don't know what is the source. Now it's stopped, I understand.
It's coming.
But it's coming. My friend told me recently that, so when you enter the Sanctum Sanctorum, you always feel that wetness on the floor, and the Purohit used to show us the way. I mean, I thought you would mention that also, but there is a reason why you excluded that.
My time's just 20 minutes. Actually, I was just talking to someone before this, and I told them that every one of these can be expanded into a separate speech. So,
the process of reading the temple inscriptions, I mean, that calls for expertise, isn't it? Do you like
when you find a temple inscription, they take what is called an estampage. So what they do is they will wet a paper and put it against the inscription and press it. Then they will take that paper carefully, bring it to their office, ASI or whatever, they'll sprinkle black powder over it. So wherever there is an impression, a dent, you can see the letters. That's the way to read an inscription. Most of the temple inscriptions, estampages were taken and they were deciphered, and it's called editing. A process called editing takes place. What that means is, portions of an inscription might be lost, or even then, sometimes irresponsible renovation would mean that stones might have got juggled. So an intelligent epigraphist will have to supply the missing pieces. That's why it's called editing. So most of this editing was done by people like Rangachari and Fleet and others during the British period. I think leaving very little for later people to do. Except when we did discover other things like Mechelem copper plates and things, but then our epigraphists also came in. But then our epigraphists have also done outstanding jobs. For example, there's a temple called Nattam, which is close to Trichy. And in the Nattam temple, you find inscriptions that sometimes seem very, very funny, because you will find that it is talking, one inscription talks about Rajaraja's 5th or 6th year, and it says Valanadu. But Valanadu was a division that Rajaraja came up with much later, not in his 5th regnal year or so. So when an epigraphist analyzed the reason for this, he found that the original inscription of Rajaraja was somewhere inside. There was another inscription of Kulothunga, the first, somewhere inside. When they renovated, they read both inscriptions together. So they picked up the regnal year of Kulothunga, they picked up Rajaraja's name and put them together. So he found that out. That took place only recently. In fact, he's not even an epigraphist. He's a historian, but he was very interested in epigraphs.
What language those?
Epigraphs can be in. They can be in Tamil, and the script can be Grantha. It can be Tamil Brahmi. It can be Old Tamil. It can be later Tamil. It can be different, but. In inscriptions, when you do look at inscriptions, what's very interesting about Tamil is Sanskrit has got conjunct consonants. So if you want to say sthana or something like that, you can write this, those who know Devanagari, you can write this half sa and you can put the next letter completely. So that's a conjunct consonant. But you don't have conjunct consonants in Tamil. So if you have to write akka, there is no such thing as a half ka and ka. Pulli da vekana. You have to put a dot on top. But on a stone, you can't put a dot on top. So when you read it, you will have to read it as akaka. If you know Tamil, you know that it is akka. Otherwise, if you just know the script and you don't know the language, you will just go and read it as akaka.
What was your work done at the Annur temple and what took place?
Can't hear you, sorry.
Annur.
Annur temple? Okay, Annur temple is a temple that has got inscriptions of Vijayalaya Chora, Rajaraja Chora, almost all the Chora kings, and Pallava inscriptions also. That temple was completely surrounded by thorns and nobody was visiting. Even the local people had stopped visiting it for about 50-60 years. So when we went there, we had to cut off all the thorns and things, and the sanctum had a gaping hole in the roof. There was a huge tree that had come in. The deity was not even covered with a single piece of cloth because water would come in and destroy whatever was draped over the deity. So it took us almost a day to go through the inscriptions. Many of them had been recorded by Rangachari when he...
Is this the Coimbatore Annur we are talking, or is it?
No, this is Chengalpet Annur. Chengalpet. It's here. I think there was a DMK MLA called Annur Jagadishan or someone. He's from that place. Annur. Okay, this is Annur. Okay, so that's where this temple is. Vedanarayana temple. It has got 3 temples actually. Perumal temple, a Vedanarayana temple, a Shiva temple, and Subramanya temple. All 3 very ancient. And the HRNC is sitting on tons of property, not doing anything for the temples. But there was this philanthropist lady who came and she said she'll establish a Nandavanam. So she dug up the temple and almost every foot she discovered a new idol. People had buried idols there. So that's the history of that temple, very ancient temple. But even in that temple, we found that the last renovation had taken place in 1912 or something, I don't exactly remember. But when they carried out that renovation, they had put back the stones in such a way that many of the inscriptions were upside down. So they just put the stone wherever they pleased. That's the danger with the renovation, and the HRNC of course doesn't really bother about it. What the HRNC does is they used to have what was called sand blasting to clean the temple. So when you do that, the features are all lost. So you will have noseless sculptures, inscriptions are lost. So everybody raised a hue and cry and said, no sand blasting. Then they said, okay, we'll do water blasting, which is just as bad. So they do that, and then they say that they're preserving stone by using ugly colors, shocking pink and blue and all that for pillars. In Sri Perumbudur, there's a lovely, there are lovely Yari pillars, and they put some ugly blue paint over it some years ago. It was so off-putting. And when you object to that, then they say, okay, we've got something which is like varnish, we'll put it over that stone. You just don't put anything over a stone, but who's to tell them that?
See, we hear always every temple has some escape routes, right?
Yes.
In case of war, to get under
There's
the
one
tunnel.
in Velur, in the Jalakanteshwara temple.
No, not only Velur, even here.
There's one here in Arumbakam. There's one here in Arumbakam.
Rockford Temple, Trichy, there are some places. I'm told, but have you had a chance to examine the veracity of these claims?
You can see that that place there, they would have bolted it and locked it. They don't let you get in. I'd love to go in if they let you.
In fact, in Srirangam temple, there are plenty of spots which are actually locked.
Yeah, but they don't let you go into those places because they're afraid that something might happen to you.
Arumbakam, which temple? The Shiva temple?
The Perumal temple.
And this lady who carried out the renovation,
She's from Andhra, I think.
I think the department of the HR, they objected to
They
it.
objected to when she said, I'll clean up the temple near Chengalpet. They said, no, you can't.
Only
We are in charge.
Only MLA can do it.
No, she said I'm well connected, I'm going to do it. I don't care what you do to me. She just